When your heart is hurting, don't add fuel to that fire by beating yourself up for not being productive or thinking that you have to fix yourself. Now is not the time for any blame or I shoulds, and you certainly don't need to be fixed.
Hey, I'm Tanya Wilkinson, and this is Death on the Daily, bringing the conversation about death out of the shadows and into the mainstream. Because along with birth and change, if there's one thing that's going to happen to us all, then death is it. And we're going to explore how death actually shows up for us on the daily in a multitude of ways, and how when we allow ourselves to accept and to be with death, how it can teach us a whole heap about how to live this life well.
So welcome to my third solo Notes to Self episode of Death on the Daily. And these episodes are all about integration. I go away and I reflect after each of the incredible conversations that I have with my guests on this podcast. I journal and I look to what feels most alive in me. Then I bring that back into this space. So in today's episode, I'm going to be really rooting into how we can give ourselves grace, kindness, and compassion. And this is after my conversation with the incredible Lucy Sheridan, someone who I've got so much love for. And if you haven't checked out that episode, maybe go check it out now or head on over there after you finish watching this, because there's so much wisdom from Lucy. But what I wanted to share in this episode was just a few key strategies that you can take forwards for when you're navigating those really, really difficult periods in life. And in the episode, Lucy shared really, really vulnerably from her own personal experiences, and then shared with such wisdom how she's navigated through what, as she refers to, are often quite messy times. And I wanted to sit with this quote from her just to root us into the importance of this. And she shared that our big emotions make us more of who we are. They help you to realize who you are and what's most important to you. And the reason this is so important to me is when I look into this world, I see how much we want to avoid those difficult emotions. I think, our culture is really hooked on those quick fixes, on the dopamine rush that we get through escaping on social media, on distracting ourselves at all costs, on not just being with ourselves in these difficult times. And Lucy also shared that when she navigated a really difficult period recently in her life, she shared that the only way was through it, and that actually it was more painful to resist it or to try to run away from it. And this, as I weave these interconnections between the podcast episodes, interconnects beautifully with my conversation with Katie Gray, because actually in that conversation and speaking to the Empowered Heart method that Katie has created, she also said that actually the pathway to healing is through it. It's through those difficult emotions. How can we feel them? How can we be with them? Now, what really resonated from Lucy's experiences and all of that wisdom that she shared around how we can then navigate our personal past was the importance of giving ourselves that grace, that compassion, that kindness, and that comfort. So I wanted to create a shorter episode for you for when you're navigating, whether it's grief or anything else that feels really tender in this life. So here, co-created with the wisdom of Lucy from the last episode, are 4 what I'm calling TLC for me strategies that can support you in these moments. Firstly, give yourself grace and compassion, and really, really make sure that's how you're speaking to yourself in these moments. I'm sure that you've connected in with that inner voice inside of you, that inner critic, as it's called. That voice that is really not helpful in those difficult moments. That voice that maybe is beating you up, telling you that you're doing a crap job, piling on the shame, basically just being really, really horrible. Now, our inner critic is formed of all of the layers of our experiences, and actually voices of authority from our past also form part of that inner dialogue. And this is compounded by the fact that we've all got a negativity bias within us. And our negativity bias basically says that we connect into and lay down more negative memories than we do positive memories. And what this means is that in difficult times, that voice can get really, really loud. So what can we do to counteract that voice? Start to tune within, start to listen to that voice. And one tip that I share with all of my coaching clients is write down what that voice is saying. Because actually what that does is that helps you to bring it out of those shadows. When we leave those voices just, yelling up from the shadows beneath us, we leave them in their power. When we move through life with that kind of unconsciousness to those voices and we're just sort of like following them, it means that that voice is dominant. That voice is hyper powerful. So tune into that voice, write it down, get it out. And actually then from that place, right next to it or underneath what you've just written there, your response. Tune into your heart center. Tune into that wise, intuitive, loving part of you that knows that what you've written down there, that's not the truth. And what you want to do in this response is really tune in as if, you were speaking to your best friend or someone in your family who you dearly love. Imagine if you got wind that they were speaking to themselves like that, like what you've written down on that piece of paper. Write your response to yourself, because that's the response that we would give to our best friend when we can sit back and say, actually, you're being really, really harsh on yourself in this moment. Give yourself kindness, give yourself grace. And if we'd give that response to someone we love, why don't we give it to ourselves? So try to do that, write it out, tune into it, and then amplify up that perspective. Secondly, set the day up with lots of gentleness and comfort. In difficult times, what can you do to really, really prioritize anything that brings you a little bit of comfort, warmth, and joy? And Lucy shared that for her, that was a Kevin Costner movie. And actually, I think, this is a beautiful time when we're navigating really difficult periods for any sort of escapism that makes us feel good in that moment. It's okay. We don't have to 24/7 be sitting there and meditating with these emotions. That guilty pleasure or whatever you want to, put on the TV, put on a podcast, that is exactly what you need right now. And actually, in my personal experience, so in the last weekend, I felt the grief really, really surface again. And actually, I felt it in my body. I woke up with a jolt one night. And the reason I was feeling that grief is because it was actually 1 year since the scan that diagnosed the birth defect within our daughter, Ngako Rayona. So obviously, it was a really, really tender time. So this Saturday, I was unapologetically on the sofa watching TV. And I actually don't watch a huge amount of TV. I certainly don't sort of tend to like binge watch for like 6 hours at a time. But I let myself watch something that brought me joy. Now you're going to probably laugh at what what brought me joy. It's a show whose name sounds morbid, but actually it's so, so joyful and really, really connected into me in my death geekery. It's called The Gentle Art of Death Cleaning. And it's on Channel U for anyone in the UK. It's on, I think, Peacock in the US. I'm not sure elsewhere globally. Absolutely brilliant show. But that for me was just food for my soul. Or at other points, and I am not ashamed to admit this, it's reality TV like Made in Chelsea. I will binge watch that as and when I need, and I am unapologetic in those moments. Thirdly, remember that doing the bare essentials and nothing else is a-okay. When we're wading through treacle, when things are really, really difficult and we're feeling it in our body, and particularly when we need to turn our focus onto our mental health, it's totally okay. In fact, it's more than okay. It's exactly what we need to sometimes just say, do you know what? To hell with the to-do list, with everything that I wanted to achieve today. And this is really important as well from a rest perspective, because actually in these moments, we need to give ourselves and our body exactly what we need in order for ourselves to process through this. And actually rest is doubly, triply important. So permission to just do the bare essentials and nothing else. And remember, even if things feel messy right now, that you are showing up for yourself. And that is enough. You don't need to do anything else. And actually, sometimes those duvet days are exactly what we need. And lastly, have the courage to tell others what's going on. And this is one that I have definitely been on a journey to work towards, and I'm still on my path. I definitely had a toxic trait of, that kind, and I still do it. I still catch myself doing it all the time. That trait of, oh, I'm fine, everything's okay, I'm all good. Even when people are checking in with me and seeing how I'm doing, yep, everything's great, and I'm working on it. And actually, there's such power when we can root into the community care and connection that surrounds us. No matter if we need to root into that, whether it's months later or years later, remembering that actually a grief journey is lifelong. That, for me, my tattoo of grief, it's going to be within me and purring away until the day that I die. And I know that there's going to be moments where that grief floors me and I didn't see it coming, because actually there's no anniversary or anything that I could put meaning as to why that grief came up. And that's okay. But I now know, therefore, that my community, that my connections to others is so, so important. And as well as talking to those who we feel comfortable to do so, it's also really important to remember you can ask for space. It's okay. And actually, and I hope, because I do know there's I hear many, many stories of workplaces that aren't so helpful, but I know that there's a lot of compassionate humans who really get grief. This awareness is building, and with that awareness means that, well, I hope that you'll be surprised when you ask for space, when you ask for the grace and the kindness of others to just push pause on a project, to give you a minute before you come back. I say a minute, give you time before you come back. I think I've been astounded at how flexible life can be if only we speak to that which we're experiencing. And I think, and this also really reflects when I work with clients, and I will support them and I'll be cheerleading them in their corners of having these difficult conversations where they're going in on an assumption of, I can't step away from work. And actually, more often than not, yes, you can. And I really, really hope that if you ask for that grace and that space, that space is given. And I also hope that if you are someone who, whether it's manages people or, interfaces into others, I hope that we can all really, really appreciate that space is oftentimes what is needed. And that actually when someone's come to you and asked for it, that takes real courage. So as well, let's honor that. Let's honor that and let's be there for each other. And I want to finish this section just with a personal story, because I want to look back at a former version of myself with love and compassion, because I made an assumption that I should not and I could not stop. So I shared in my last Notes to Self episode that one of my reasons for leaving Formula One was actually that I went through the grief of a miscarriage, and that really changed my whole lens on the world. Now, something else I want to speak to is the fact that I actually didn't take any time off. It was the time where we were still in lockdown, so I was working from home, but I didn't miss a beat when it came to work. And I actually spoke to and shared what happened with a wonderful human lady called Georgina in the people team. And she was like, oh my God, you need to stop, take some time. And I refused. And I know that was, well, I don't know exactly why, but I know that was something rooted in the shock, my conditioning, that kind of let's keep calm and carry on type attitude. But I realize now that all I needed in that moment was just to step away from business as usual and to be. And I didn't allow myself that, which actually meant the grief just came like piling out. I mean, the grief was going to come piling out anyways, but that grief just came cascading out in a multitude of ways. And I don't know, but I would anticipate that a lot of the healing journey that I had to go on after I left Formula One was compounded by the fact that I just, in that moment, pushed it down and I didn't ask for that space. And so I share this just for anyone, whatever you're going through. And actually, I'd say, even when we're feeling poorly, make sure that you ask for the space that you need. And finally, sharing my note to self. So these are little notes that I write, whether it's to me in the past, a past version of myself, where I just need to give myself some healing wisdom and words from the perspective that I sit in now. Or sometimes it's to my present self. What do I need to say to myself in this moment? Or it could be to my future self. It's something that I know I'm going to really find supportive to root into when I'm navigating those difficult times in life. And so I wrote this note to myself on those days where I've been frustrated, when I've stood still in my grief. And actually, going back to last Saturday, and I mentioned this earlier in the episode, when my body was just feeling that grief and I realized I needed to slow down, immediately that narrative of, I've got stuff I need to do today and I'm not, this bank holiday is therefore out of the window, etc. This is a note to self that I needed to tell myself in that moment. I'm going to speak it, and I'm going to speak it by referring to it as to you, just in case these words resonate for you. If they do, please take them forwards, make them your own, and I hope they might support you when you need. When your heart is hurting, don't add fuel to that fire by beating yourself up for not being productive or thinking that you have to fix yourself. Now is not the time for any blame or I shoulds, and you certainly don't need to be fixed. Now is the time to prioritize you and gifting yourself all of the love, grace, and compassion that you would, in a heartbeat, give to your loved ones when they need. Above all, be patient, be kind, and just allow yourself to be in this moment exactly as you are, no matter how snotty it is right now. So that rounds off this episode of Notes to Self for Death on the Daily. I hope that this is here for you whenever you need to really, really root into that TLC, as well as perhaps it might be an episode that you want to share with someone, with a loved one, a colleague, anyone in your life, to help them to navigate that forwards path. And wherever you are right now in your journey, I am sending you lots and lots of love.
All of my gratitude to you for joining me for another Dead Conversation. Death on the Daily is edited by David Strutt. The music is Set Free by Katie Gray. And I am Tanya Wilkinson. And if you enjoyed this episode, I would be over the moon if you can rate, review, and subscribe. It really, really helps me to get the word out there. And if you want to say hi or to hear more about my work as a coach and death doula, including how I support my clients to navigate their death on the daily, then all of the ways that you can connect with me are in the show notes. I'll be back soon with some more Dead Conversations. And in the meantime, take good care of yourself and others.
There's a cold fire, there's a crossfire, and there's something